This is the complete guide to 2025 World Taekwondo sparring rules. If you don't know who I am, my name is Master Danny Lee. I started Taekwondo as an unathletic kid at the age of 13 to today becoming the 74 kilogram US national champion. Today, we're gonna be breaking down the modern day rule set, so then that way you guys know the ins and outs of the game, you don't risk losing any of those valuable points, and then you have a good knowledge of all of the rules, so then that way you can take advantage of them and start dominating in your next competition. So first, we're gonna be covering the field of play. We have our 10 by 10 meter competition area. That's gonna be 10 mats by 10 mats. And inside that competition area, we got our octagon. So the octagon is gonna be 8 by 8. Anything outside of the octagon, if you step on it, even so much as half your foot, that's gonna be considered a Gam-Jeom, or also known as a penalty. In a little bit, we're gonna be covering the penalties, but what you guys need to know is all of the fight that's gonna be happening is going to be inside that octagon. So when you guys step on the mats to start your fight, there's going to be multiple different referees on the field of play. In the middle, we have our center referee that's going to be in charge of giving out any penalties or stopping and starting the contest. In the corners, we're going to have 2 to 3 side referees which are going to be responsible for scoring punches or also adding additional points for turning techniques or spinning techniques. And then finally, we have our main desk referees, and they're in charge of going over any video replays that your coach or the opponent's coach may request. So now that we have an understanding of the field of play and the referees in the contest, we're gonna be covering what requirements you need to sign up for a World Taekwondo Sanction event. So whether that may be an open or a championship, you're gonna need these requirements so that you could even sign up. First, we're gonna start off with holding a nationality of your participating team. So that means that if you're fighting out of the States, you need an American passport. Same thing if you're fighting out of South Korea, you need a Korean passport, etc. Next, we're gonna be going over what it means to be recommended by the WTMNA. So an MNA is a Members National Association. So in the States, that's gonna be USAT, and then you're gonna go through their background screening check and sign up for their membership. So then that way you're gonna be sanctioned by them as well. Third, you need to be a holder of a Taekwondo Dan or PUM certificate. So that means that you need to be at least a first degree black belt in Taekwondo, and that needs to be sanctioned by Kukkiwon over in Korea. And then finally, we're gonna be going through what a WT GAL is, a GAL or a Global Athlete License. If you go to the World Taekwondo Global Athlete License website, you can purchase one. And then what that does is it allows you to compete or sign up for any international tournaments. Lastly, we're gonna go through the age requirements. For seniors, that's gonna be 18 to 32 years old. But there's an exception. If you're 17, you could still fight one age requirement up and go into that senior weight class. For juniors, that's gonna be ages 15 to 17. And then for cadets, that's gonna be 12 to 14. But in the game of Taekwondo, there is one catch with the ages. If you turn a certain age this year, then you're counted as that age. So you could be 14 turning 15 this year, but you count as 15. So what that means is instead of fighting in the cadets, you'd fight in juniors even though you're still 14 because you turned 15 this year. So next we're gonna be covering uniform and apparel that you're gonna be wearing during your fights. So when you're fighting at a World Taekwondo sanctioned event, you need to make sure that all the gear and the uniform that you're wearing is sanctioned by the World Taekwondo. So what that means is whether it be Adidas, Tusa, or J Calico, you need to find a brand that is sanctioned by the World Taekwondo, so then that way when you step on the mats, there's no problems. So we're gonna cover each protective equipment that you need when you step on the mats. We're gonna start from head to toe. If the competition you're going to is using a electronic scoring system, you don't have to worry about bringing a chest gear or a hogu or a headgear as well, because that's gonna be provided. What you do need to worry about is starting over here, we have our mouthpiece that needs to be either clear or white. Next, we're gonna go for our gloves, our arm guards, our leg guards or shin guards, and then also we have to have our groin protector. For the feet and sensors, there's 2 different electronic scoring systems. We have KPNP and also Dedo. But the brands are different, so you need to make sure that you have the corresponding socks or sensors so that when you go to fight, you can still score those points. So in the game of Taekwondo, we have our weight categories or our weight classes. So like any other combat sport, the weight classes are there to make sure that the size or height of the fighters is not too different. That way we can have a fair game. So when we're talking about seniors, we have 8 different weight classes in the male and 8 different weight classes in the female. It goes from lowest to highest: fin weight, flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, and also heavyweight. All you have to know is, for example, If it's 74 kilograms, that means that you have to be under 74 kilograms, but above 68, because that's the next weight class below. Same thing for women's. If you're fighting in under 53 kilograms, you have to be at least 49.1, but under 53. Of course, different countries use different metric systems. So for seniors, normally there's 8 weight classes, but when we go to a games, so like an Asian Games or a Pan American Games, or also sometimes in other high-ranking competitions such as the Olympics, we go by Olympic weight classes. So in the Olympic weight classes, there's only 4 per male and 4 per female, and each of those 2 is combined into one. So for example, for male, instead of the normal 8 weight classes, we only have 58, 68, 80, and above 80. And then for women, we have 49, 57, 67, and above 67. When you go in to talk about junior weight classes, there's a total of 10 per male and female. And then when we go down to cadet, there's also 10, but that's going to be also according to not only their weight, but also their height. So the day before your competition day is gonna be weigh-in day. On that day, you have to make sure you're under your weight class, and then you show up with your credentials. Once you've successfully weighed in, you also have to make sure and check if there's going to be a random weigh-in. What the random weigh-in is 20% of the amount of athletes in your bracket are going to be randomly selected for a second weigh-in the following morning of your competition. This ensures that athletes aren't cutting weight in an unhealthy manner. So for the random weigh-in, if you get selected, you have an allowance of 5% of your weight class that you can be over. So for example, if you're fighting in the senior male featherweight division, which is under 68 kilograms, and you get selected for a random weigh-in, you have a 5% threshold, which is going to be a total of 71.4 kilograms that you have to be under the day of your fight. If you're selected and you don't make that weight, then you're going to be automatically disqualified. So you have to make sure after weigh-in days that you don't overeat and you keep under that 5% threshold so you can still fight the next day. So in most Taekwondo competitions, it's going to be a single elimination bracket. What that means is if you lose once, then you're done for the day. So if we have 16 people in the division, it's going to start at round of 16. So let's say you win your first fight, you've moved up to round of 8, or also known as the quarterfinal, and that's going to be deciding whether you can move on and at least secure a bronze medal, or if you lose, you'd again be done for the day. After the quarterfinal, we have our semis, and then after semis, we have our final. So next we're going to be covering a big question that I get from a lot of people that are coming from the old school game and trying to convert to the new school game. In the old school game, we used to have 3 rounds. Depending on the weight class or the age, we would have anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. Now we changed that over with the new school rules. Instead of 3 rounds and counting up the points or tallying up the points to see who has the most at the end, it's going to be going by a best out of 3 format. So there's 3 rounds, but whoever wins 2 first is the automatic winner. So that means that if I'm fighting you and I win the first 2 rounds, then the game is over. For seniors, those rounds are gonna be 2 minutes long with a 1-minute break in between. And then also the 4th round, or the golden point round that used to be existent in the old school game, has been eliminated. So in the case of a tie at the end of 3 rounds, when we go to the criteria of superiority, we're first going to be looking at the player that scored the most spinning kicks. So if it's 5-5, same score, but I scored a spinning back hook kick to the head, which is worth 5 points, and you scored 2 body kicks and a punch, which is also worth 5 points, I will be declared the winner because I executed more spinning kicks. So in the case that during the match, both you and your opponent did the same amount of spinning techniques, so for example, you scored a spinning back hook kick and I scored a spinning back hook kick, then we're gonna move on to which techniques were most valued in the rulebook. So if it's a tie at 7-7, we're gonna look at what techniques were used to score those 7 points. In order from most valued to least valued, we're gonna start off with regular headshots, regular body shots, punches, and then who has the least amount of Gam-Jeoms or penalty points. So for example, if it's 7-7 between me and you, and we both scored spinning back hook kick, so it's 5-5. But then from there, I score a body shot, which makes it 7, but you scored 2 punches. That means that I would win, or I would be declared the winner of the tie, because I scored that body shot, which is valued higher in the rulebook. Now from here, if both of our scores are the same, and also they were scored by using the same value techniques, so for example, We both did a spinning back hook kick for 5 points each, and then we both scored a body shot each, so it's 7-7. We're gonna go to see who has the higher number of hits registered by the electronic scoring system. So when looking to score on the electronic scoring system, there's going to be a threshold that measures power and force. So in order to score a valid point, you need to not only connect with the chest guard, but you also need to be above that threshold for it to be considered a valid point and go onto the scoreboard. Anything that's lower than that threshold is going to be considered a hit or a touch, and that's what we're going to be using to decide the winner that we were talking about earlier. So if we have the same score and our value of our techniques is the same, we're going to be going to the amount of times that I touched your chest gear and the amount of times that you touched my chest gear. So if I was able to not score, but at least register 5 times and you only registered twice, that means that I would be declared the winner. So finally, in the case that both of our registered hits are the same, that's going to be going to the referee's choice. So out of 3 referees, the fighter that gets the choice of at least 2 is going to be declared the winner. So once you step onto the mats, you have to make sure you understand the referee's commands during your fight. Taekwondo is a South Korean martial arts, so all of the commands that the referee is going to be given is going to be in Korean. So we're going to start off when they call your name to come onto the mat, they're going to say Chung Hong. That means blue and red. So you're going to stand facing your opponent, and then the referee is going to say 차렷 경례. 차렷 means attention, and then 경례 means bow. So after you bow and you shake your opponent's hand, and you also bow to your opponent's coach, you're going to put on that headgear, strap it on, and then the referee is going to say 준비, which means ready. He's going to check that both of you guys are ready, and then once you guys are ready to start, he's going to say 시작. So that means start. At the end of each round, he's going to say 그만, which means stop of match. So that's going to be the end of each round. So once the match has started, there's going to be times where the referee has to break the contest. So that means that he's stopping the round, but he's going to start back up again. In order to break the contest, he's going to take his hand and then bring it downwards while saying 갈려. So once he says 갈려, you need to make sure that you stop attacking your opponent. After 갈려, he may give out a Gam-Jeom, or he may talk with his other referees in order to adjust the score. When he's ready to start the match back up again, he's going to take his hand like this and he's going to say 계속, which means resume. Finally, at the end of each round, he's going to take his hand, similar fashion, but this time he's going to say 그만. That means end of round. So to go over the Korean terms that we went over again, is going to be 청홍, which means blue and red. 차렷 경례, that means attention and bow. 준비 means ready. 시작 means start of round. 갈려 is going to be break of round, and 계속 is going to be continue. When you get a penalty, that's going to be called a Gam-Jeom, and then finally at the end of each round, they're going to say 그만, which means end of round. Next, we're going to be covering how to score a point. So with your fist, you can only score a punch to the body. It has to be with a tight fist, and that's going to be scored as 1 point. Next, we're going to go over our kicking techniques. So again, you can kick to the body or the head, but on the body, it has to be part of the chest protector, no lower than the belt. And then for the headgear, it's going to have to make contact with either the head or the face. The punches are going to be scored as 1 point. Next, a kick to the body with either the top or the bottom or the heel of your foot is going to score as 2 points. A kick to the head in similar fashion is scored as 3 points. And next we're going to be going into our spinning techniques. So when you do a spin, you get awarded an additional 2 points for wherever you score it. So for example, if a body shot is worth 2 points, but I spin and hit that body shot, like a tornado kick or a back kick, now it's considered 4 points because I put in the spin. For a headshot, if a normal one is 3 points, but for this time I spin and hit a spin and back hook kick to the head, it's going to be considered 5 points. So an additional 2 as well. So for again, we have our punches, that's 1 point, body kicks is 2 points, head kicks is 3 points, spin to the body is 4, and then spin to the head is 5. For any penalties we get, which is a Gam-Jeom, that's going to be -1. For any penalties that we receive, Gam-Jeoms, we're going to be adding 1 point to our opponent's score. When going about scoring those points, it's going to be decided by the electronic scoring system. So we talked about the threshold earlier, but I'm going to be covering it again. On the threshold for the body, it's going to vary between weight classes. So in order to score, you have to make sure that the force of your kick not only connects with the bottom or the top of your foot, but it exceeds that threshold, so it scores as a valid point. Anything below that threshold is only going to be considered a registered hit or a touch. When it comes to scoring punches or spinning techniques, that's where the corner judges are going to come into play. If there's 3 corner judges, then 2 out of the 3 corner judges have to press that button for your punch to be validated and count as 1 point. If there's only 2, then both of those judges have to press that button. For spinning techniques, it's gonna be the same thing. If I spin, then 2 out of the 3 judges have to press that spin button to make sure that I get awarded those extra points. And if it's 2, then both of them have. So the next section that we're gonna be covering is going to be Gam-Jeoms or penalties. It's essential that you guys know this, so then that way you don't lose any valuable points that will cost you during the match. So the list of prohibited acts, or what you can or cannot do, changes multiple times throughout the year. Today we're going to be covering all of the different prohibited acts, so then that way you can know what will get you a Gam-Jeom and what won't. First, we're going to talk about crossing the boundary line. So at the start of this section, we talked about our 8x8 octagon. You have to make sure that you stay in that octagon at all times, or you're going to get a penalty. So if I draw a line in front of me and I even put so much as 1 toe out, that's gonna count as a Gam-Jeom. So I gotta make sure that once I get towards the corner of the ring, I'm not backing up any further. The next is going to be falling down. So what counts as falling down in Taekwondo is any part of the body that's not your feet. If it touches the floor, it counts as a penalty. So if I take a knee or I kick and then I drop my knee to the floor, that counts as falling down. If I kick and I try to catch my balance and put my hand on the floor, that's gonna be falling down. And of course, if I kick and I actually fall down, again, that's gonna be a Gam-Jeom. So next we're gonna be covering avoiding or delaying the match. When you're in the fight, you have to make sure that you stay in an engaging style, so then that way you don't risk getting a Gam-Jeom. So that means that you have to be throwing shots at your opponent, and if the referee feels like neither fighter is fighting at the moment, they will tell you 공격, which means attack. Once they say 공격, you have 3 seconds to attack, and if neither of you do, you both get a minus point or a Gam-Jeom. So another way that you can get a Gam-Jeom from being inactive is if you keep pulling back. So if you're, for example, with 10 seconds left on the clock and you have a lead and you're not attacking at all, but you keep sliding back, you back up to run out the clock, that also counts as stalling the match. If during the match you turn your back away to your opponent, so instead of a spinning technique, I'm actually turning away. I could be running or I could just be evading, right? If my back is turned towards the opponent, that's also going to be counting as avoiding or delaying the match. If you over-exaggerate an injury in order to stall the clock so you can regain your breath, and the referee feels like it's been too long, the referee is also able to give you a minus point. The next one we're going to be covering is a little bit tricky. This is going to be grabbing or pushing the opponent. In Taekwondo, you're not allowed to grab any part of your opponent. So whether they're kicking and you try to grab their foot or their leg, or you're on the inside the clinch and you're grabbing their chest guard or grabbing their waist, so then that way you can prevent them from kicking, that counts as a minus point. So next we're going to be covering pushing, which is a big part of today's game. When you get to the clinch or the inside game, you're permitted to push your opponent if you have your hands on their chest gear. But you have to push them in a quick singular push, whereas you don't get a Gam-Jeom, because if you keep your hands on them and you continue to push them, that's going to be too long of prolonged contact, and it's going to be counted as a penalty. So when you get to the inside, you want to push off quick and then get your shot off and then reset. Also, if you're at the boundary line, so your opponent has their back to the boundary line and you push them out of bounds, that's not going to be their minus point, it's going to be your minus point. So you got to be careful when you're pushing them, what area of the ring you're in. Also, if your opponent is in the action of kicking and you push them over, that's going to count as preventing their kick, and it's also counted as a minus point. Next, we're going to be going into Gam-Jeoms that come with leg techniques. So in Taekwondo, there is no leg blocking or leg checking. So if an opponent is kicking me and I raise my shin to block, that's going to be a minus point. Next, if I go to kick the opponent and I kick below their waist or below their chest gear, that's also going to be a minus point. Finally, we're going to be talking about keeping our leg in the air. So in the modern day game, there's been a lot of front leg fighting. So we're talking about cuts or appbars, right? That keeps my front leg in the air while I do multiple techniques. So a few years back, there was so much of this front leg fighting that they implied rules to make sure that it's not just foot fencing. So this is going to be a little bit tricky, but I need you guys to look. I'm going to show you. When I bring my leg up in the air, I can keep it here for no longer than 4 seconds. So I can keep it here for 4 seconds, and within 4 seconds, I have to let out one kick and then put it down. If I have my leg in the air and then I just drop it without kicking, that counts as a minus point. If I keep my leg in the air for over 4 seconds, then that's also a minus point. Now, the tricky part is when I bring my leg up into the air, I have a maximum of 3 kicks that I can perform. So if I take 4 seconds to commit those 3 kicks, that's fine. If I go 1, 2, 3 and put it down, that's okay. But if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, that's going to be a minus point because I exceeded 3 kicks. So a general rule of thumb, when you bring your front leg up, you want to clip it at 3 kicks and then put it down. And you want to make sure that you're not leaving it in the air for longer than 4 seconds. Up next, we have attacking our opponent after 갈려 or break. So during the match, if the referee says break or 갈려, you have to make sure that you don't attack your opponent. If he says 갈려 and you didn't mean it, but you were in the motion of kicking and your foot left the floor, then it's all right. But if you were in the motion of kicking and they said 갈려 and your foot is still on the floor, but then you throw the kick, that's gonna be counted as a minus point. As I said earlier, hand strikes or punches are only permitted to the body. So if you hit the head with your hand, then that's also going to be a Gam-Jeom for you. Any knee attacks, so if I bring my knee to whether it be their legs, their body, or their head, that's also going to be a Gam-Jeom. Once an opponent falls, the referee is gonna say 갈려, and he's gonna give them a Gam-Jeom for falling down. But in Taekwondo, once an opponent falls, right, the game is stopped. So you guys gotta make sure that after they fall, you don't hit them. Because if you hit them, that's also gonna be a minus point. Finally, we have 2 rules that are implemented to stop some cheating kicks that we call it in the modern day game. So when you get to the clinch on the inside, you're not allowed to hit the chest gear with the side or the bottom of your foot. So that's called a monkey kick. Because the chest gear has a gauge or a threshold and it's not a person scoring it, it can't differentiate if I'm actually doing a real kick and I'm back kicking or I'm side kicking, or if I just come to the clinch and I bring my foot up and I monkey kick it like this. So in order to prevent that, if I monkey kick, right, that's going to be a minus point automatically. And also if I come to the inside and I do a monkey kick to the back of the head, so that's gonna be where I'm close and I'm grabbing them, but I bring my foot up to hit the back of their head, that's also going to be a minus point. This is going to be another tricky subject. Earlier, I told you guys, if you lift your knee without kicking and you put it back down on the floor, that counts as a minus point, which in most cases it is. But in a lot of times during the modern game, in order to get to the clinch to the inside, especially as a shorter fighter, you see fighters using what is called as a knee shield. So they bring their knee up and they travel with it to keep them safe, and then they drop it and then get a kick off right away. The reason this isn't a Gam-Jeom is because in the rule book, if you bring your knee up and then you drop it and follow it with the kick or follow it with the punch right away, you're exempt from that Gam-Jeom. So that's why knee shields work in the modern day game. So now that you guys know all the ins and outs of the Gam-Jeom or the penalties, I want you guys to make sure that you know how many Gam-Jeoms you could receive each round. So as we talked about earlier, it's the best out of 3 format. So you gotta make sure that you win 2 rounds first. During any round, you have a maximum of 4 Gam-Jeoms that you could receive and still win it. But once you get that 5th Gam-Jeom during a single round, that round is automatically over and your opponent wins. So it doesn't matter if you were winning or you were up 10-2. If you receive 5 Gam-Jeoms in a round, the round finishes and then you're automatically down a round. So you have to make sure that when you guys are fighting, take care of the penalties and make sure that you're not doing anything that will cost you valuable points. The final part of this guidebook is going to be covering knockdowns or KOs. So in the game of Taekwondo, if you knock out your opponent or you knock them down to the point where they can't proceed, you're the automatic winner. So once an opponent is knocked down, the referee is going to start counting in Korean. We're going to go over that today. It starts off as 하나, 둘, 셋, 넷, 다섯, 여섯, 일곱, 여덟, 아홉, 열. During that 10 count, the opponent that got knocked down needs to show that they're ready to fight before that count hits 8. So if they're counting 5, 6, 7, and they stand up and they're ready to fight, then that's okay. But if they say 5, 6, 7, 8, and you still didn't show any sign that they're trying to stand up, then that's counted as an automatic KO. So during the match, if you ever do get knocked down, just know in your head, you do have a few seconds to recover, but you need to make sure that you start showing signs that you're ready to fight before that countdown hits 8. So now that we've covered everything that you need to know about the modern day rule set, I want you guys to check out this video right here, where I go in depth about 33 different advanced sparring tactics that you could use to dominate your next sparring championship.